MMA rants and raves. Cormier versus Lesnar for the UFC Undisputed Heavyweight Championship of the World. Guys, let's talk about this fight. You know something, guys? I'm really disappointed. Here you have a champion, a great champion, the longest reigning UFC heavyweight champion, the most dominant UFC heavyweight champion in UFC history. Alright, this is a guy who has taken punches from the likes of Ngannou, Roy Nelson, Alistair Overeem, and reigned victorious. Alright, this tough guy, very durable guy, well-rounded, really good cardio. I mean, a complete, bona fide UFC superstar. And then what happens? He gets brutally knocked out in the first round by Fat Albert. I mean, what's going on over here? I mean, his opponent looked terrible. I mean, the guy is a physical mess. He was around close to 250 pounds, a 5'11" guy. You could see he was out of shape. I mean, at the beginning of the fight, as I thought what happened, he would be dominated in the grappling as well. I mean, he was dealing with a much bigger, stronger man, a very well-conditioned fighter, and he was being pushed against the cage, bullied. He had underhooks on him. It looks like he was getting frustrated. He was winning the fight, and then he breaks. And I'm like, why is he breaking? I mean, you can see the ref was warning him to work. That's what you want. Hold him there for as long as you can. Weigh on him. Wear him out. That's how you beat guys like this. And what do I mean? Look at guys that fight, that are shaped like him. All right? Short, stocky heavyweights. If you notice, they have one thing in common. They gas. Look at the recent fight, which I predicted. All right? It actually happened just as I predicted. Junior versus Blagoy. You could see Blagoy was getting tired. A guy was 5'11", pushing 260. I mean, this is a guy, when he faced Fedor years ago in a Sambo competition, he looked like he was a middleweight. He looked like he packed on 60 pounds. I mean, when a fighter is carrying this kind of weight, it wears on them. They gas. They get tired. You see this. It's a trend with guys like this. Guys like Blagoy. Guys like Roy Nelson. Guys like Mark Hunt. They gas. They get tired. They're carrying around a lot of extra body fat. All Stipe had to do in this fight is wear his opponent out. Press him up against the cage, as we well know, is one of the most cardio-intensive aspects of mixed martial arts. We've seen that already, okay? And that's what was happening. And then he breaks. And I'm like, what is this guy doing? The last thing you want to do is stand in the open octagon with a guy like this. Watch his past fights. The guy has a head like a piece of concrete. You can't knock him out with punching power. It's been tried before. He has been blasted by some of the most horrific power we've ever seen in MMA. Guys of the likes of Anthony Johnson, Vulcan, okay? He's been hit by hard-hitting heavyweights. When he faced Barnett, when he faced Roy Nelson, he cannot be knocked out with punching power. It's been tried, not even close, by a guy who hit him with a punch. He has a head like a piece of concrete. Whoever hits him might break his hand, or he's not going to get knocked out. It takes kicking power. Leg power is something that can take this guy down. That's what it takes to get him out of there. Even that might not be enough. Gustafsson hit him with a knee, a massive light heavyweight. And even that wasn't enough. It almost was. And it took John Jones to kick him in the head to knock him out of there. I'm just saying, this is what it takes. So why try to do something that hasn't been done before? It just doesn't make sense. It was just poor fight IQ, a bad game plan, okay? Do what works. Press him up against the cage. Put a body on him. Put wear on him. You want to stand in the open octagon with him? Wait till he gasses. A guy who looks like that, he should start gassing, especially if you put a lot of wear on him. Well into the second round, third round, he might not even be able to get off his stool. Then, if you want to trade with him, it might be a better idea to do that then. But why do it? Use the grappling. And these analysts don't know what they're talking about. They're saying, oh, he has to go in there, and he has to use his wrestling. He has very high credentials. He's an All-American, Olympian caliber. Listen, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. You could be the most highest decorated wrestler in the history of the world. If you're fighting a tough wrestler, which Stipe is, he may be one of the best wrestlers, best MMA wrestlers Notice I use the word MMA wrestlers, because MMA wrestling is different than conventional wrestling. There's a lot of aspects going on. When that clinch takes place, there's striking involved, there's submission attempts involved. You don't have that in cut and dry regular wrestling. This is the difference. You don't have to have all those credentials. You just have to be a strong, good, solid wrestler, which Stipe is. He's actually better. He's a great wrestler. You don't have to have those credentials, but you're going to dominate the wrestling because you're the bigger, stronger opponent. And that's what we saw at the beginning of the fight. Come on, Stipe, stick with it. Use the grappling. Don't strike with this guy. You're winning. You'll gas the guy out and you'll win the fight. And then the other mistake he made is when he got that eye poke. Listen, if you're getting an eye poke and you can't see in the eye, you don't fight. The stakes are too high. This is a championship fight. If you can't see, even if your vision is somewhat blurred, you can't fight. Don't continue. You say you can't see, and then you retain your title and you fight another day. You're the one that got poked. It's the guy who poked you. It's his fault. He shouldn't have done it. The ref warned him. Keep your fingers in. He wasn't doing it. That's also poor fight IQ. Don't fight. Don't be this warrior spirit type of guy, or you think you're cocky and you can beat this guy with one eye. And let me tell you something. Cormier is a great fighter, a legend, solid fighter. He's proven it time and time again. He's a reigning, defending champion. But the bottom line is, this is not a good strategy for him. If he continues doing this, I mean, if he thinks he can fall in love with cheeseburgers the night before the fight, and then say, oh, well, I'm a bigger heavyweight now and I have more power and I can knock people out better, it's not going to work. He won this fight because Stipe did not fight an intelligent fight. Credit to Cormier, he fought a brilliant fight because he knew that's the fight that he was going to win. He knew that punching power is not going to get him out of there. So if he trades and stands with one guy, he's likely to have the advantage. So it was a very poor fight IQ performance by Stipe. I mean, I don't know what he was thinking. He had a couple of opportunities to get out of here. You get eye poked, you can't see, refuse to continue the fight. Don't fight in the open octagon. It just didn't make any sense, all right? Now, with that being said, what happens at the end of the fight? Brock comes in, there's a whole fanfare, and I have to say, a lot of people are criticizing the UFC, and I think they're wrong. I think this is a brilliant move by the UFC. Obviously, the UFC needs a big draw. I mean, they've lost most of their bona fide superstars in the past years. GSP is not fighting anymore. Conor McGregor, we haven't seen him in a long time. They don't have a big name out there that can really get a lot of eyeballs watching. They can get the pay-per-view buys. Brock can do that. Brock is responsible for putting the UFC on the map years ago. I mean, the UFC went from being the organization of Dan Severn and Tank Abbott to what we see now. And Brock is partially responsible for that. I mean, it was guys like Brock. Fedor did it internationally, if you remember back then, and the UFC took off. So they knew they need a guy like this. Now, as far as Brock is concerned, he's been out for a very long time. He hasn't won a fight in years. So that's the bottom line. I mean, what can we expect from a 41-year-old guy that was suffering from what seemed to be a life-threatening illness? And since he had that, he just was not the same fighter. I mean, he used to be a guy that if you hit him, you can break your hand. It's like hitting a brick wall. To being a guy that if you hit him, he just turtles up. And that's the type of fighter that we have seen. Now, with Mark Hunt, he looked a lot better. Now, he can implement that strategy against Cormier, and if he does, he'll win. See, the thing about Cormier is, and this is why these analysts don't know what the heck they're talking about, and I said this, wrestling is different than boxing. It's not like Mike Tyson fighting a very big heavyweight where they're just boxing and it's just punching power versus punching power. Wrestling is everything power. Everything is being used. The arms, the legs, the torso, the hands, the cardio, everything is going forward. And if you have a highly decorated wrestler versus a strong wrestler, the ratio of having a lot more credentials as a wrestler versus a guy who's bigger and stronger than you pales in comparison. It's the strength and the size that's going to prevail. And you could just watch Cormier. See him in the light heavyweight division. He dominates. He ragdolls guys. When he fights heavyweights, he has more trouble. You see, he defeated Barnett, but it wasn't easy. It was a grueling 5-round fight. When he fights very big guys, he has more trouble. He actually lost the wrestling exchanges against Gustafsson and against John Jones. And part of the reason is because those guys are so much bigger than he is. Size is a huge factor in wrestling. That's why they have weight classes in wrestling. It's very important. No matter how much credentials you have and how good you are, you can't teach size. And if you look at all his fights, the toughest wrestling competitions that he had within those MMA matches were the guys that were very big. Watch his fights. And that is going to play out here. If Brock can avoid any damage, if he can avoid any punches, and somehow shoot for those takedowns, which he does very well, and use a game plan like Stipe, he's going to go for takedowns over and over and over again. And maybe Cormier is cocky enough to get into a wrestling match with him, and that is a match he's going to lose. He's not going to be able to out-wrestle Brock. Brock is a very good wrestler, and he's too big and strong. Now, with that being said, this is an MMA match. The huge advantage that Cormier is going to have is in the striking, because I can't remember Brock being able to take strikes from his recent fights. So if he gets hit with something hard, if he has enough knockout power to take out Stipe, and Cormier has strong knockout power, I can't see why he can't do it against Brock. So, I mean, basically, the way I see this fight is that it's going to be an MMA fight. I don't think Cormier is going to be getting into a wrestling match with him. I think that's not going to be a smart game plan. It's going to be an MMA fight. And it's really difficult to predict what's going to happen here, because even if Brock wins, the question is, will he be clean? You know, will he be able to pass all the tests at the end and prove that he's clean? Because even if he wins and he's not clean, he doesn't win. That's why it's not a good fight pick to pick Brock, because you have two things going against him. And Cormier just has to implement his striking game. His wrestling has to be just good enough to try to fend off some of Brock's takedowns to frustrate him and force him into some sort of a striking element, and that might be enough for him to get the win, maybe early. So I'm going to go to prediction here. If this fight happens, I got Cormier to win this fight. I would like to know what you think about the fight. Please leave your comments. Please subscribe. Please like up this video, and thank you for tuning in.